Hello and welcome to another Slate demo series. This time we will be chatting about translation codes and leveraging them for customized communications. If we have not met, my name is Jacob Henshaw. I am a senior Slate communications strategist here at Carnegie. I'm a former grad school Slate captain, and I've been at Carnegie since 2023. My persona is the analytical and attentive shepherd. So for today's agenda, we're going to chat through all things translation codes. So first, we're going to start out with defining what translation codes are. Obviously, very important for our conversation today to all be on the same page as far as what we're talking about. So first, we'll define translation codes. Next, we'll hop into our instance and take a look at how to leverage translation codes, specifically within email communications today for more evergreen content and things like that. And then finally, we'll chat a little bit about maybe some best practices and some considerations for maintaining translation codes after you implement them. So as I mentioned, first things first, let's define translation codes. So we have pulled from the Technolutions knowledge base article here what translation codes are. They are a Slate functionality that changes a text value to a different text value. Very straightforward. It means what it means. It changes something that is a text value to a different text value. So to add a little bit more context and color to that, I'm going to reshare my screen and we're going to dive into our instance and take a look at what they are, how to find them, where to use them, things like that. So you'll see here, we're starting from our Slate home screen. Translation codes does not have its own icon here at the top. We'll have to hop into the database in order to locate them. You will see here that they are located under the automations section within database. If you ever forget that, of course, you can just search for translation codes and they will show up here. So let's go ahead and hop into translation codes. So you'll see here that we're taken to a page very similar to if you have worked in content blocks before. You first need to establish a key for your translation code. So you would create a new key, you would give that key a name, and then you would select a type. For all of the use cases that we're going to have today, we're going to use a string type for our values here. So we've created a couple ahead of time just to save the time of building. We'll take a look at what these look like and where we're referencing these within emails as well. So the first one we'll take a look at here is our major deadlines. So the use case here would be that we want to call on a specific deadline within an email text or within an email body in order to say your deadline is X. If you don't have this housed elsewhere in Slate, translation codes is a good consideration for where you might want to house that type of information, and we'll show you how to do that now. So a quick tip here within translation codes, I always like to create kind of a placeholder value here that starts with an asterisk. This is going to always make sure that it starts at the top of your list of values. And then it's basically just a key for the values to show what information is being housed within each of the export values of the key itself. So you'll see here that we're referencing the major prompt value as the specific value that we're then going to translate into a different value. And then within each of our export values here, you'll see that we have our spring, summer, and fall deadlines housed there. So what this looks like within a specific major and an actual translation code here, you'll see that we have our business administration major or program in this case. We have the export value of the spring deadline of January 1, 2025. You'll see that the summer value is null here. It's not existent. And that's just because in this case, we don't have a summer entry term for our business administration program. And then finally, you've got the fall deadline of July 1, 2025. To take a look at what it looks like for a summer one, obviously, we've just got a populated value here for our summer deadline. So that is how we would set this up for a traditional spring, summer, and fall. Obviously, your business practices of your institution could dictate that you utilize a different approach or something like that, but this is just kind of, general use case here. So now let's go over and hop into a mailing and take a look at what this looks like in referencing these specific deadlines within an email. So you'll see here that we've just got a test mailing set up. I've pulled in a test record that is associated with the business administration program, just so we can see the values for that particular program. If you'll recall, you'll remember that our summer for our business administration, we did not have a summer entry term. So that is not existent here. We just utilized some liquid markup to say if that value was null or didn't exist, then to remove that summer reference here. And we'll show you what it looks like for a program like ART that does have a summer entry term as well. So you'll see here that we've got application deadlines. We've referenced spring deadline is January 1, fall is July 1. You might say, great, that looks awesome, but we send these email communications year round. We want to be a little bit more discreet about the year and not include it within our mailing. We want to make sure that these are evergreen. That's great. So in order to do so, we'll just need to add a format mask in order to identify the specific month and day and leave out the year itself. So we've created some subquery exports here. We'll want to do these within subquery exports. So you'll see that we've just created a descriptive name, spring deadline, no year. We've pulled in the person declared major. This is the field that we're actually translating. Within that export is where we want to do the heavy lifting of the translating. So you'll see here that we've got the export value is a translation code here. Once we click that, you'll see that we have to select the key. We've selected major deadlines as the key. And then finally, we've selected export value because if you'll recall, export value, which is the first one, is going to be our spring deadline here. Now note, you don't want to override the format type here within this export. You'll want to actually do that if you go out one layer to this part. You'll do the heavy lifting of the format type here within this part of the export itself. So we'll go ahead and add a date format type. Then we'll add a format mask of month, 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 day, day. And this mask is then going to allow us to see the full spelled out month and the day associated with it as well. So I'm just going to update these two other values as well so that we have that there. Great. Now, when we hop back into our mailing, you will see that we've got a spelled out month and a day associated with that program deadline. So this allows you to keep those mailings a little bit more evergreen, maybe be sending them year round and just wanting to make people aware of deadlines regardless of whether or not it has passed for this specific term. Now, in order to show you what this looks like with a different program that does have a summer entry term, we'll pop over to our ART program here where we've pulled in a test record that is referencing each of those various application deadlines. You'll see because a value exists, that summer term is also now going to populate here. So that is deadlines. You can definitely get super creative with the uses of these deadlines. You can even add some comparison filters to mailings to make sure that people aren't being sent a specific mailing after a deadline has passed. You can get very creative with all sorts of use cases once your deadline information is housed within these translation codes. But that's not all. We can definitely reference more information within translation codes. So let's pop back into our translation codes here and take a look at some other use cases, specifically within the grad space here today. So you'll see we've created a different key here. This one's called major details. This is where we're going to house some specific information about each of the programs that we want to reference here. So since we've been working with the business administration program, let's pop into that one. You'll see here that we've got a bunch of various information. Let's actually look at our key first to determine what this information is. So we've got our major prompt value just as we did with our last one. Next, we have our program director name, email, email sender, program URL, and program modality, all referenced within this single translation code. So if we pop over into the business administration one, you'll see that we've got our value of business administration, which has to match the same value as the prompt itself. For the first value, we've got the program director's name, Mr. BA, and then we've got Mr. BA's email is mba@carnegiehighered.com. Here we've pulled in the format of the email sender itself. You'll see how we reference that here in a moment. And then finally, we've got our program URL and then our program modality just spelled out as a hybrid program. So whenever we pop back into our mailing here, you'll see that we've got this information housed here within our program information section. So we want to say, hey, thank you so much for your interest in the program. Let's get into the MBA program first so we can see how that looks with the information we just looked at. So business administration, back into our mailing, you'll see here that we've got Mr. BA as the program director for the program director email. We've hyperlinked that so that it's easy to use for the end user. And then we're referencing program modality. Great. You'll also see here that we have just added the merge field to our URL within our dynamic button as well. So just to show you what that looks like on the back end, you've got your button. You need to make sure you select an other protocol here in order to pull in a URL. But once we pull in that URL, we're then able to see, great, we click on that program page and it actually takes us directly to our business administration program here as well, which is great. So if we were to go back up, change it back to art, we'll see where this information changes. And we're provided dynamic information that is based specifically on our art program here. So you'll see Mr. Van Gogh is our program director. There's his email. And then we've got, it's an in-person program. And then you'll see the URL that's populating here is art.carnegiehighered.com. Awesome. So if we wanted to take it one step further, you'll notice within our translation codes that we're referencing a couple pieces of information. This is the dynamic sender field. And then we've got a different key that I'll show you here in just a moment. But for that dynamic sender, if we were to go in and take out the generic one that we've got in here, and we've created a new merge field where we have just connected that person major field with that translation code of the program details, and then we have set that correct export, we're now able to reference the sender so that we have a dynamic sender here. So for our art program, we have Mr. Van Gogh as the program director, and that is the person who's sending the email. So again, if we were to pop back into business administration, you'll see that we now have Mr. BA as the email sender. Perfect. So if we wanted to take it even further here and get even more creative with how we can utilize translation codes within these emails, is that we can say, we can do something better with this subject line. So right now we're just saying, thank you for your interest in referencing the major field program. So we're saying, thank you for your interest in the business administration program. That's okay, but maybe we can make it a little bit more custom, a little bit more specific to that program. So we'll create a new key. For this one, I've named it AppGen Subjects. Here within our key, you'll see that we've got AppGen number 1 subject, AppGen number 2, and so on and so forth. You can build these out for 5 values within each key. So for our business administration one, we've got for AppGen number 1, our subject line, we want it to say, let's get down to business. So very similarly here, what we have done is just created a new merge field here for AppGen 1 subject, where we have connected, again, the program with the translation key that's appropriate, and we've pulled in that merge field. So now for business administration, we see that custom subject line coming through. It is recommended that you utilize translation codes in order to pull in subject lines like this. Technolutions has recommended not using liquid markup and content blocks for this use case, so translation codes is definitely the way to go here. Now, again, if we were to change the program back to art, you'll see that that subject line is now dynamic. Let us paint a picture of the art program. So much more custom, much more creative. Obviously, copywriters and things like that can do a better job at creating good creative subject lines, but just how to institute that and pull that into your instance, translation codes are a great source for that. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about what translation codes are, how to implement them, how to utilize them, I do think it's valuable to chat a little bit about maintaining these translation codes. And this can be an item as a part of cycle prep that you're doing each year as you're creating your new mailings and things like that. You want to make sure you're evaluating these subject lines, making sure that they're staying up to date, all that good stuff. But if a program director changes, this is where we would need to make a change within the translation code as well, so that anywhere we're referencing that translation code, we're able to actually make sure that it's pulling in the appropriate information. And then finally, within the translation codes, the deadlines, this is probably the most pertinent place. Anytime an actual application deadline passes, you'll want to make sure that you're updating that translation code in order to reference that new updated deadline specifically with the year so that that information is being pulled in correctly into the mailing itself. Now, Technolutions has created a super easy way in order to do this. They've actually created a translation code import source format, and they provide a template via Excel spreadsheet with the appropriate column headers here so that you can just populate that source format with each of your translation codes that you need in order to just drop a new source into that source format, and you're able to update the translation codes very easily with that approach so that you're not having to manually go in and update each of your program values, especially if we're talking about 50 different graduate programs or something like that. That import source format is definitely the way to go there. So, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming. It has been a pleasure chatting with you today about translation codes and what they are. If you do ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at carnegiehighered.com. Have a great day.